said is that they're still very new, even in other fields separate from fluency and stuttering. And so we're kind of like a little bit of a background because stuttering is a very low prevalence disorder. Not a lot of people work with kids or even adults who stutter, and so kind of giving you a bit of as Cecilia mentioned, where we're at, and kind of I want to give you a bit more of where we're coming from and how we led up into being in this moment. And so here's kind of a really brief, very short timeline kind of what the history of stuttering therapy and treatment has been. And so, back in the 30s up until the 70s is where the typical standard stuttering therapy is, like modification. Oh my gosh, modification, using speech strategies, trying to induce fluency, which has been starting, which people have been starting to move away from more. And so most commonly and still most popularly used is the medical model, which tends to focus a bit on, using the strategies from previous speech therapy, like stuttering modification and fluency shaping, but kind of focusing more on overall health and wellness. And then social model, fairly recently into the 90s, focusing on removing barriers in social environments and social stigma. And so kind of completely moving away from communication and speech and moving more into relationships, interactions, and communication with other people. Yeah, and then 2019, kind of most recently using avoidance reduction therapy and using ACT, so acceptance and commitment therapy. And so we'll talk about this a little bit more detail later on, but getting into, oops, I don't know where we went.
Just a couple.
There we go. Yeah, and so moving more and towards ACT and kind of focusing on desensitization towards stuttering. And so towards acceptance and being comfortable with your speech and being comfortable with who you are as a person who stutters. And then most recently, 2024 is kind of the most recent article we found about improv therapy, and then also where we did our improv workshop at the camp last summer. And so, yeah, going into ACT and acceptance and commitment therapy, kind of the main principles of it, of what we were trying to incorporate in some aspects as well. But being present, being aware of your environment, of your communication partner or partners if you're in a group, and just kind of being aware of your surroundings of what's happening. Being willing to communicate and join into the conversation. And so not just being a bystander or a watcher, but actually being an active participant in the communication, in the event, in the group. Yeah, so thought diffusion, kind of being able to process and combine your thoughts in a way that you want to communicate, being aware of yourself and what your role is in that environment. So are you a speaker like we're doing? Are you an audience member and a listener? Are you a teacher? Are you a student? Just kind of being aware of what's happening. And then towards the end of this, defining values and committed action is going more into kind of the day-to-day interactions and process of what is your goal as a communicator? What are you wanting to do? Are you wanting to communicate thoughts and ideas in a classroom, in a lecture, within your friends, your family, and then finding out what your goals are in your life as a communicator, as a person who stutters or other communication disorder, and then taking steps to achieve your goals and your values within that mindset.
If I can add something too to this, what's really interesting is, and we're kind of touching on the different parallels between these approaches in improv. Committed action is really a huge component of being an improviser, being able to do improvise scenes, because when you get up there, it's you and your scene partner, you really have to commit. You kind of have to trust that other person to support you in that commitment. So I think that parallel is pretty cool.
Yeah. And so kind of the general rule of thumb that is being pushed within therapy in our field that I'm sure a lot of you are aware of is multidimensional model. And so taking a lot of these different therapy aspects and choosing what's best for that client in that moment and kind of combining them together to make a very specialized, individualized care plan and therapy plan for your patient, your student, your client, wherever it might be. And so focus of therapy within the multidimensional model is communicative competence and effectiveness. So in terms of stuttering therapy, not necessarily fluency, but being able to effectively communicate thoughts, ideas, and be able to grow relationships with people. And so that being said, I will say this as a caveat, as a person who stutters, who also went through therapy and is also a speech therapist, there is a lot of nuance involved with this. And so there's some people who are pushing kind of still more old school for fluency and more kind of new school towards only acceptance. And I think that there can be a middle ground. And so again, the most important thing is talking to your patients, your families, because even, a child who is 7 or 8 years old, they know what's happening and they can express their thoughts and their feelings. And so they are able to communicate, I want to make my speech a little bit easier because it hurts or it's uncomfortable or because I'm being bullied or laughed at, or they're having a number of different feelings or reasons towards why they might want to work on their speech, and that's totally okay. And then I've met some kids who, they are totally cool with it. They're Mr. Popular on campus. All the kids love hanging out with them, and they stutter pretty severely, and they just didn't care, and that's fine. And so, yeah, the biggest thing is just talking to your patients, education, talking to the parents and the family, and knowing that someone who stutters can be successful and can live a very full and happy life. Speaking as someone who's getting their PhD and also stutters right now.
Look at her.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think it's a very helpful model by Constantino in a paper that he published in 2020. And so focus on model spontaneity. And so kind of going with the improv theme, everything happens very quickly and in the moment, and things change from second to second. And you have to kind of be on your toes and be aware of what's happening in your surroundings, be aware of who you're communicating with and what the scene is in that moment. And so, yeah, one thing that they had highlighted in this article with this thing that spontaneous speech is often an achievable long-term goal and can contribute significantly to improved quality of life, while fluency is more tenuous and not necessarily a sufficient criteria for success. And so anybody who stutters will tell you that fluency goes up and down between days, between weeks, between months. It's not a linear, consistent progress. It varies in the moment. You can have really great quote unquote talking days where you're communicating very easily. Even if you are stuttering, it's not necessarily as effortful or difficult. And then sometimes you might be speaking really fluently, but it can be a lot of effort to communicate those things despite, sounding good, quote unquote, in your speech. And so on the chart up top, we have spontaneous, and at the very bottom, we have effortful. And then on my left, which would be your right, we have disfluency, and then opposite side, we have fluency. And so kind of seeing how different aspects of the quadrants correlate. And so the kind of goal is for spontaneous speech, whether it's fluent or disfluent. And so, whichever side of that you want to fall on is going to be up to you and your client and your patient. And we just want to encourage communication, whether that includes stuttering or not, and just want to have people and students and even adults be comfortable in themselves and their skills as a communicator, regardless of how often or how little they stutter. Yeah, and so kind of why all this matters and why we're talking about these things is because, adults who stutter and even children who stutter as well, as a general rule, they typically tend to think that they have lower communication skills and that they're not as good communicators as people who don't stutter, which is kind of what we're wanting to get rid of everybody can be a good communicator regardless of how you communicate, whether it's verbally, written, if you're doing it with stuttering, without stuttering, everybody can communicate well and effectively regardless of how it sounds. And so, higher communicative competence can lead to overall impact of stuttering, so quality of life aspects. And so you can stutter very severely, but you can still be comfortable in your speech despite that. And you can still accept that you stutter, even if you don't necessarily like that you stutter. And you can have a higher quality of life. You can have less stress, less anxiety associated with that, even if you still have higher rates or more frequent stuttering moments. Yeah.
Come back around.
Yes, and so we're going to go a little bit kind of how it's all connected now.
Yeah, so we've talked a bit about improv, we've talked a bit about drama therapy broadly, and we've talked a bit about stuttering therapy and the different approaches that are out there. So in terms of combining these things together, because that's what we're all here for, what the main parallels that we found are, that the promotion of communicative, and I kind of alluded to this with the acceptance commitment therapy, the idea of communicative confidence, which is also a big focus at the camp that we did our workshop at, confidence and competence, right? They both matter. And, the idea of making those definitive choices, saying what you want to say, raising your hand and asking a question, or if you're doing improv, the act of stepping into a scene. Teaching adults with improv, I think the hardest thing is them feeling comfortable enough to take kind of take a baby step when they want to get into the scene. And then the improv teachers will teach you you just have to get in. If your foot is in, you're in. What happens from there, we'll see, right? And then the idea of kind of avoidance reduction, which we didn't get too detailed in that approach, but it is a great one. The idea of, again, jumping into a scene and listening and being ready.
So a very important improv principle is listening. If you have two people doing a scene here and you're commonly how it's set up is sometimes you are an improviser waiting to go in, you have to really listen to what's going on to be able to then meaningfully contribute and then add to it, right? Because that's often what's funny. So, that idea of that avoidance reduction and, all comes back to doing what you want to do. And then also kind of in terms of acceptance and commitment, the culture and, general, I guess, it's not the fanciest word, but vibe of improv communities, having, been involved in a couple of different cities, kind of knowing people who do it in, various levels of professionalism at this point. There is a very strong culture associated with teamwork, positivity, and mental reframing. So adults, what I've, realized is that when you go to an audition or when you, even if you do something that does have a little bit of inherent pressure, everyone is very, very encouraging of each other. I don't even think I've never even seen a situation that wasn't like that. And I don't know if the Pacific Northwest represents everywhere, but I guess it's not the states that are known for being nice. So take it for what you will. But that being said, the culture of improv is it's very positive. It is very teamwork oriented. You don't really do it alone. That is stand-up comedy, and that is a different thing. So what's happening now? So we have been able to find a couple different organizations that are incorporating improv and looking at improv in kind of different extents. So there is a very new study at the University of South Australia where researchers are collecting data. They first did interviews with different speech pathologists and people who stutter on their feelings about improv. That was kind of their first step. But they are now trialing group improvisation with the goal of improving communicative confidence and reducing anxiety. They're focused on teens and adults with their approach. So it's a 9-week group improv program, Unscripted Confidence. So the study is just starting. I actually had the chance to email with one of them. Super cool. Australia is great. And yeah, so they're really, formally starting to look at this, which is great. And then in terms of like in the community, there's a lot of different camps support organizations for children who stutter. And we also know via a lot of research, I'd say at this point, that they're very effective and very helpful. So a couple of them, Camp Say is a camp and support program based in New York City. They do a great deal of performance-based, both kind of day camp programs. I think it's called Confident Voices, where they do a lot of different drama-based activities. And then they have a camp, and they have teachers at the camp who come and do improv and theater. So that's pretty incorporated in their programming. And then Camp Speak Dream Live is based in Austin, Texas. And they're a camp, they're a day camp program similar to Camp Say, I would say, very much focused on increasing confidence, not targeting speech at all, but, facilitating kind of the, willingness to speak out, the camaraderie and sort of the, support group aspect of it. These two really focus on. And they both have, kind of slightly different aims and slightly different outcomes. But, without getting too into it, they do both utilize improv in their programming. And then there's a couple of, kind of smaller groups, not full camps, but Northwestern University, for example, in Chicago, has been recently running an improv group as well for children who stutter. So, it's definitely happening. I think we're in kind of the early stages of figuring out more about this, which is very exciting. All right, and now we're going to speak a little bit about Camp Shoutout, which is where we're coming from.
Yeah, so this is where we ran the improv workshop this past summer in 2024 in August. And so Camp Shoutout is a traditional overnight recreational camp that has a therapeutic emphasis, which might be a little bit different than other camps where we do actively target various therapy strategies, not necessarily speech, but trying to improve the overall communication experience for these 18 to 18 or 8 to 18-year-olds, excuse me. And so we have different speech and communication aspects of it. And so things we call challenge by choice. So for instance, students are able to go up during breakfast, lunch, and dinner and read what we have on the menu for that mealtime, or they're able to raise their hand and speak during our discussion in our like big group time. And a lot of opportunities for children to kind of put themselves out there and for campers to, have a challenge by choice and kind of do an uncomfortable thing and speak in front of a group of maybe 100 to 150 people out there. And there's also a lot of outdoor recreational and team building exercises. Our high school kids, they have a group called Leaders in Training where they do a lot of team building and growth together. And they practice a lot of strategies and exercises together, trying to focus on communication and then also like friendships and aspects like that and leadership. And also we have our improv and our theater session that happened during the camp as well. And so at the end of the camp, there's a talent show called Shoutywood. And so, yes, and so campers and leaders as well are allowed and encouraged to sign up and participate in any way they would like to. Some people do stand-up comedy, some people sing, some people do dances, they do instruments, they do improv like we have.
Lightsaber
Lightsaber
dance.
Yes. One of our campers did a lightsaber dance. He had like a full-on Jedi costume. I don't know what the character was. I'm not a Star Wars person, but he had like a full-on lightsaber and like the hood and everything. And he did an interpretive dance to Star Wars music, but also to Lord of the Rings. So it was so fun. These kids are so talented. And then one of these kids did some like crazy classical music piece, and he was like maybe 8, 9 years old.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, crazy talented kids. They can sign up and do anything they want, and we will be there for 5 hours to give all of these kids,
It's true.
all these campers a chance to do all of the things they want to do. And so, yeah, at Camp Shoutout, our goal is to gain an understanding of each camper and support them in having a pleasant communicative experience, build advocacy skills, and develop a support network. And this is copy and pasted from the camp director, Kristen Camella herself. And so, yeah, apart from being a place for campers who stutter to be a part of it, it's also a place in a workshop for grad students and SLPs to kind of come in and learn how to interact with children and teens who stutter. And so apart from the typical camp stuff, we also split into groups a couple of times a day within their age group. So either elementary, middle school, or high school, and focus on building functional and effective communication skills, whatever that might look like. And so at the beginning of camp, all of our campers set goals for themselves. And then at the end of camp, we kind of sit and discuss, how they did and how they felt about their goals and kind of what they want to target outside of camp as well. And so some things that were incorporated in camp as well as our improv workshop was the 5 areas of focus. And so this is a banner that's hung up in front of the main dining hall / like event center that our campers are going to see multiple times a day. And so we have attentive, which is awareness and monitoring of yourself and others in communicational environments and what your communication aspects are. Assertive, we have participating and advocating for yourself in various interactions and initiating those interactions as well. Confident is having body language and voice volume appropriate for situations. And so we kind of do, even little skits within our small groups. And so kind of a really small version of improv unintentionally maybe. And we kind of have our campers practice, if you're hunched over and my back is turned to you, then maybe I'm not super interested, but if I'm facing you and my body's open towards you, then, I want to interact and I want you guys to be interacting back with me as well. Effective, so communicate with greater ease, intelligibility, and organization of ideas. Again, not necessarily just fluency, but being able to communicate all the things you want to communicate and not feel like that you have to kind of hold back on what you want to say just because you stutter or because you might stutter. And then proactive, setting oneself up for communication success and so taking steps for yourself, whatever that might look like, to be successful in your communication, whether that be whatever the context is in class, in school, with friends, with family, all of those different things. And so Cecilia's going to talk a little bit about the workshop activities and kind of what that looked like at the camp in that environment.
Yeah, so just to kind of add on to another example of, ways that we will work with these campers. I worked with a camper last summer. She wanted to just call and order a pizza. So we grabbed a phone and we called and ordered a pizza, and she was practicing self-disclosure. So she said, please give me a moment to order. I stutter. And the pizza guy's reaction was just like, oh, huh? Okay. But, I think what was really cool about it was that she did have the chance to do that self-advocacy. And, we, of course, can't always control how people respond, but I think instilling those skills kind of in these kids is, really important. So, both in this improv workshop as well as just throughout the whole camp, promoting self-advocacy and that confidence in those 5 areas of focus are definitely important. So, this is the workshop that I put together. It was a little bit of a challenge to condense. I had 4 days to do it. So I was basically just trying to condense like an improv curriculum into that short period of time. So I wanted to hit on sort of the main components of improv. There isn't like a unified improv curriculum that I'm aware of. Just as you know, as an aside, like different theaters kind of would have their own. The theater I teach for, I'll reference it a little bit later. They have like their own curriculum that they've designed. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious to learn kind of more about that as I continue on this research path, I hope. But there isn't really a unified one. So it's kind of just, taking different pieces from what some of the other theaters and training programs that are doing. And then also this was, with children and adolescents. So it was modified accordingly, right? You're going to work a little bit differently than you would run a workshop with adults. So the first part of the workshop is we really worked on kind of just warm-ups and learning names and really the basic principles. Warm-ups are super important and very valued part of improv. That's, where you're like, you know, passing the clap around a circle or like sending somebody a hand signal and they're sending it back, those types of games. A lot of times they're accompanied by learning a name, making eye contact and saying that name. And that's all very intentional because it aims to both build the confidence of being able to make a definitive choice. And also it is aimed at ensemble building. So in getting into more advanced improv, you want to really feel like you have each other's back if you are performing, because it's scary to be up there and to be making everything up. It's legitimately terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. It's scary. But if you are up there with people and you know that they're going to be able to help you out if you have a moment where just don't know what to say, or, if your people have your back, an improv scene is going to look great, even if you think, oh my gosh, I didn't do that thing, or, even if you second guess yourself. So really that's what that is oriented around. At least, that was emphasized at the training program. It's called Jet City Improv in Seattle that I teach for. So yeah, looking at each other, standing around in a circle, high energy games that require learning names, looking at each other, hand gestures, and attention as well. It's a big part of that. So that was really day one. Also kind of speaking to some general principles of improv. The most commonly known is like saying yes and. So, if someone makes what is called an offer or does something, does an action, tells you something, you want to, ideally go along with that and then add your own piece to it as well, right? Like, if you think about it in terms of conversations, if you went up to somebody and you were like, wow, like, it's a really nice day, like, I just drink a coffee and stare at the sun, and they just looked at you and they were like, no, that conversation would end.
Yeah.
It also wouldn't be a very fun interaction. I'm just to be honest, right? So in improv, it's the same thing. People want to see authenticity and they want to see interesting discoveries and interesting things happen. And you're making it up so it's funny no matter what. They even actually teach you a little bit against trying to be funny because it's going to be fun. It's almost guaranteed to be funny because you're making it up. So just some of those really kind of, basic principles that first day. And then the second day, we got into character a little bit. So this is probably my favorite part of improv is character work. So we kind of talked about changing our voices, changing our stature, doing all these sort of different things. And I think in the spirit of working on communication and the way we work on communication at Camp Shout Out, this is really valuable, right? For kids to play with their voices. What does it feel like if I'm a character that's very loud and very assertive? And what does it feel like if I'm, someone who's a little bit more reserved, right? So, getting to do this is really helpful for just general communication, as well as, learning improv and learning how to kind of embody a character. So one really concrete way that we did that, that really, I think, helped the kids open up, because the first day, and we'll get into some, specific kind of camper reflections and observations. The first day, they were a little nervous and, kind of unsure, which is completely reasonable. And by the second day, I could see that starting, with playing characters and with really getting into that silly side, because that's when I feel like it gets very silly when you're playing a character. The kids really were opening up. So the game that we did was we did a interview a character game. So you have two people sitting. You have one person who is the interviewer, and then the other person is the interviewee. You can play this game several different ways, but like just generally speaking, the audience or the other players are kind of giving attributes or giving suggestions to the interviewee. So the interviewee is making up a character of some kind that is being interviewed, right? So it could be like, I don't know, Mr. Bubbles, the man that stands outside and blows bubbles at the candy store. Like that's your character, right? You're kind of coming up with different attributes and trying to look like them, act like them. What would that guy stand like? What would he sound like? And then the interviewer is going to ask you questions that kind of help with developing that character further, right? So the kids really enjoyed that, and that really got them sort of warmed up to that concept. And then the third day, we got into narrative skills. So this is a bit of a personal preference in terms of just having done a little bit more of that type of improv. But I do think it's very valuable because it's really just the idea of storytelling. And, going back to the idea of effectiveness, we work on narrative skills a lot with kids. Being able to tell a story and, beginning, middle, and end, conflict, all of that is really wrapped up in this. So it's a very powerful skill for everybody to have. And in improv, it's really important because it's enjoyable to watch a story play out. That's why we like Pixar movies and other movies. They're not the only ones with plots. But, right, we like seeing that story structure. It's something we're used to, and it's something we've, taken comfort in since we were children watching Pixar movies or listening to books. So we we'll kind of get into this more specifically, but a game called 7 Sentence Story Structure is the one that I like to use to teach that, where everybody kind of tells a different element of a story, and the combination of everybody results in a whole story being created. And then the fourth day, kind of combining all of this, and different elements were sprinkled in all the days, right? If you're working on storytelling, you also want to work on characters because characters are in stories. And paying attention is very important because if you don't hear what the other person said in the story, it's going to be hard to continue it. So they're all important. But the last day, we kind of worked on the element of performance a little bit. The kids had, I think pretty early on wanted to be in the talent show. We kind of established that, that was,
Do I think?
yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That was like what they, wanted to do. So we knew we were going to be doing that. So we rehearsed it. This is where we worked on things like starting a scene, definitely an art in and of itself, not always easy to do. Working collaboratively to do that. There's kind of different ways that interestingly, in most improv formats, there's actually a very specific art to like ending somebody else's scene, but you're doing it to help them. Because if they were up there doing it forever, eventually there's kind of a beat you hit. Eventually they would run out of steam. And if you kind of see somebody running out of steam, you want to get in there. Is sort of, just putting it kind of plainly, right? So working a little bit on those skills, and the kids picked up on it great. I mean, this is like hard stuff. Like this, we were getting into some pretty specific elements of this. And the kids were ready. They were into it, and they were 1,000%, I think, ready to get into some of these very specific skills. I think that they really thrived with a bit of a healthy challenge by choice. So yeah, that's kind of what we worked on, and things, performance traits, being able to project your voice, being able to have good stage presence, being able to kind of give other people space when you're on stage. There's so many times that I've been in improvised plays where like we just have to practice trying to not talk over each other. Sometimes you have like multiple people and you're trying to like collaborate with each other, but giving somebody space is just as important as talking, which I think is a kind of a profound concept too. So this just kind of shows some of the, kind of beginner level to more advanced level skills. This is something that, I took from the curriculum a little bit more directly. And I realized that I need to change this in the PowerPoint that I put out to you guys because I didn't write in what these acronyms mean. But Pro is working on character, reason. So like why does your character want to do something, objective, kind of similar to that, and then where. So, you know, where is the location? So really what Crow is like establishing what is happening in a scene, right? It's in it, you know, it's something that usually comes kind of with time, but it's a little bit harder of a concept. So by working on all those other elements, we sort of got there, if that makes sense, right? You know, being able to confidently like state who you are and where you're at in a scene is very important. In real life, I do have a friend that does this and I call her out on it. Real life, we don't generally say, wow, it's so great for us to be at this coffee shop in Seattle, Washington right now. I really enjoy that. That's kind of odd. But in improv, that's actually what Crow means. You do have to kind of, you know, give a reason why you're there and who you're with. So that, you know, was something that was integrated, again, kind of, you know, in the more advanced side. In that beginner level, that's, you know, the warm-ups, that's the, you know, getting used to just being around each other and playing a little bit. But Crow, and then Vape is about different elements of character. So voice, attitude, perception, and energy. And like I said, these will all be, you know, I memorizing an acronym like that. It's not even easy for me to do. I just think it's funny that I forgot that. But yeah, it'll be in the slides if you want access to them. So those different elements of character, being able to like create and customize your own character is really important as well. And then, you know, towards the end, like I kind of referenced before, getting into more advanced is that performance. So this was, you know, kind of the makeup and the structure of what, you know, we do in, you know, in summary, in teaching like an adult class. Again, this was transferred to kids. This was done over 4 days in a more systematic manner. But I think that it is beneficial to kind of, you know, get a chance to see just what does this, you know, curriculum look like. And this would also vary depending, of course, on like the theater and training program. Like I said, there's not a unified one. All right, and then I'll do this one. Yeah. Okay. So we want to talk about a couple of the wonderful campers that we worked with and who we got to really see evolve and do improv over the course of the week. You know, they started out unsure about it, and by the end, they were on a stage doing what I would consider to be improv that is on the par with adult level improv I've seen in my city. So that's huge for these kids. Truly, I was so impressed. So this camper is Camper M, 13-year-old male. He had attended Camp Shoutout. This was his second summer. I worked with him both summers. He's originally from, I believe, Brazil, and he's trilingual. So very cool. And the first year that he attended he was pretty soft spoken. You know, it was volunteering to speak was pretty challenging for him. But he and I kind of started to get to know each other towards the end of that first summer. And I believe he did really specifically say that he liked coming to camp, you know, so he was getting used to that environment. And, you know, as time went on and, you know, kind of him coming to the improv workshop, he was sort of back and forth on it at the beginning of the week. Day one, I think he hung back a little bit. That's, yeah. Really day two, though, where kind of that change happened, where I saw sort of that, you know, him opening up a little was that character interview exercise. He did it. He was the character, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Might have been both even. And what he said was he found, is this when the puppet came?
Mhm.
Yeah. He found a puppet from like, you know, probably somewhere inside the camp lodge. Found a puppet, brought it with him, and he's like, well, I like doing improv if I have this. So we incorporated, you know, the prop work into the character work. So providing that, you know, outlet. I thought that was really interesting that he so kind of attached to the character side of it. So over the next few days, things started to get more advanced. You know, he stuck with it very well. He participated in everything. And you know, the change from the beginning to the end in terms of all of those 5 factors that we talked about earlier, and just kind of anecdotally the degree of, you know, confidence and teamwork and you know, being able to get to a point for him to get to a point where performance was an option, not just an option, but something that he wanted to do, I think was a really strong testament to the merit of these activities.
Yeah, and so a different camper that we worked with, Camper A. And so kind of quick side note, we're going to show a quick video after we talk about the campers to kind of give you guys a visual about what they actually did. And we have videos of them doing improv at the talent show that we had. And so with Camper A, he is a 12-year-old first-time camper. He came in with a friend actually, and that's kind of how he heard about Camp Shout Out. And so whenever we were doing our introductory meeting with them about kind of what their goals were for the week, one of the things that he had very clearly said and volunteered information about was that, you know, he really wants to make friends and wants to have those relationships, but a really difficult thing for him is initiating conversations and kind of reading the body language and the social cues of the person that he's talking with. And so, you know, that was kind of his goal for the week was he wanted to initiate with some other campers around. He wanted to build his skills and learn about, you know, what being a communicative partner is, what being an active listener means, and his various aspects of, you know, how to interact and how to build friendships and relationships. And so one of the really helpful things that, you know, he had learned from the improv group was, you know, how to start scenes and how to initiate those conversations and start those moments with somebody. And yeah, one thing that he felt really comfortable with was like he loved telling jokes. He loved making people laugh, and he did it a lot. And he was really funny, and he was good at the comedic humorous side of it. But he's kind of didn't know how to incorporate that in an appropriate sense in conversations. And so, you know, day one of the improv group, he was kind of struggling to find his footing of like, you know, when do I jump in? When do I join? When do I step back even? And so as we kind of went on and as we learned more skills and more practices throughout the week, he was able to participate more. He was able to lead a lot of the scenes, and he actually did the talent show twice, once with us in the improv group, and then once again doing a stand-up comedy bit and kind of like a fact-telling thing about like outer space and the solar system that he really enjoyed. And so he was able to take the skills that he learned in improv throughout the week and throughout the lessons and incorporate that in his conversations, but then also kind of build the confidence to, you know, do it as a show on his own in the talent show. And so let's see if we can pull up the video if it wants to
Yeah.
work.
This is a little dicey in terms of if it will work, but
We're gonna adventure together, y'all.
we're gonna hope, yeah, we're gonna stay positive.
Maybe we're gonna stay positive. Let's see. How's everybody doing?
You loving this talk?
Yeah.
Good.
Y'all gonna be a part of it real quick?
Spoiler.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, wrong way. Oh, there's no video. Oh, okay. Thank you for telling me. That's helpful.
Okay, yeah, it's probably a setting thing.
Oh, don't do this to me.
I don't know why it would be different.
What does that do? Oh. Okay.
So the one with the snake, I think it's a snake. That's Camper M.
And then there we go. This is okay.
Oh, and we did obtain permission from the necessary sources.
Yeah. So every
Releases have been signed. Everybody has consented.
yes, all of these are allowed to be used. We've asked multiple people. There we go.
No problem.
Yeah, so that's a 1-minute video of what ended up being a 15-minute improv skit, actually. Yes, and so there was a very wide, where's my mouse again? Hold on. There we go. Yeah, it's a very wide range of skits and topics and things that were covered with all of these campers. And so with all of this, you can kind of see how, they were involved in it, they were laughing, they were joking around, and they were super excited to be a part of it, which was not the vibe, or to kind of quote Cecilia, that was happening on day one. There's a lot of hesitancy and a lot of kind of nervousness about doing it. And then once we got to the point of them being able to participate, then, they were in it full force. And actually, the improv group was a mix of different campers, but was also some of the SLP and volunteers that were there. But honestly, the campers were the one that were up on the stage most of the time. We were just kind of there for background support. If they needed like a crowd to be in the scene, like that's kind of what we were. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to actually add just a little bit to like what they did, because I do feel like this gives like a little context to sort of like, how much they accomplished. We did a format where basically kids go up to like kind of two person at a time, but others can join in as they see fit. They kind of all stand, it's called a montage. They all stand in the back line and wait until the two people have kind of reached like the point where usually people are laughing, and then two more have to kind of make the definitive choice to come in and start something new. So yeah, like she said, 15 minutes of that. I mean, it was great. It was very funny, and I really mean it. It was definitely on par with improv that I've seen with adults. So, all right. Yeah, we're good on time. We're done.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So this is
Yeah, and so as we're talking about this, your thoughts might kind of be this is a camp setting. How can I incorporate this in therapy? Let me tell you how. And so, kind of like I mentioned earlier, with the multidimensional model, if you want to incorporate various aspects of different models and therapies and resources into these roles with campers, similarly, kind of want to incorporate various aspects of improv therapy and various topics into your session, whether it's for 30 minutes or an hour, if it's a group or a single session. And so you want to focus very heavily on person-centered approach, not necessarily focusing on the disorder or on progress for fluency or not, but focus on your client, your patient, your student, wherever setting you might be in, whether it's a school, private practice, outpatient, whatnot. And so see how, different activities that we will be showing you / y'all will be participating in very soon involve in this. And then, how like narrative and retelling can be incorporated. So for instance, for anybody who has kids and you've asked them, how was school? Fine, good. What'd you do? I don't know, nothing. And so how those things can be applied of, beginning, middle, and end, participating and being an active participant in communication. And so, yeah, we're going to go through some of the games that we have used and that y'all can use in therapy. And there's also going to be a QR code for a handout very later on in the presentation at the end of it, where y'all can download some activities and games and kind of how they're incorporated into, language, communication, speech, and like how they can be used practically in a therapeutic setting. And so, yeah, with all of that, it can be adjusted to comfort level of your students or of your patients. And so if they're at the point where they're maybe not wanting to communicate in front of a crowd or do performance level improv or even in a group setting too, you can do that within your office, or you can maybe even ask, if you're out of school, like the admin can come into the office and watch your students maybe do an activity or two and kind of just adjust it and be really creative with it and have fun with it. Because if you're having fun, then your students are as well. And if you're kind of sitting back, not really into it, then they're not going to be either. And so, really important thing for therapy and working with kids who stutter is that if you're not willing to do it, then why should they? And so we want to make sure that we are fully engaged and fully active participants. That way they can be as well, and they are encouraged to do so with us. And so there's some kind of quick limitations about this. And so since we know that it's a different setting, different environment than a typical therapy setting, and also alongside with improv therapy, not a lot of people maybe necessarily enjoy it or want to do it. And so public speaking can be a really big fear for a lot of people, and especially more so for people who stutter for various reasons. And so, that can be a difficult thing of, if someone's not willing to go up in front of a stage in front of a lot of people and do a very difficult thing, then kind of might limit what you might be able to do with that. And then similarly for self-disclosure, it's a difficult thing for some people to be comfortable with stuttering publicly and being able to admit that they stutter and being able to do that in front of a crowd of strangers. And so, kind of working with your patient or client, and maybe this not being the first thing you do, but kind of later on, once they're a bit more into therapy and once they've been with you for a little while longer, if they're comfortable and with their communication and with their stuttering, say like, hey, here's a fun thing that maybe we can try with our friends, or if you're in a group therapy setting, or maybe even other therapists or teachers or admin in the building. And so since all this is still so new, there's not any unified curriculum out there. There are improv groups that teach classes, kind of like what Cecilia does up in Seattle, but even then there's not a set, here's how you do improv and here's a book that you can read to be a master at it. And even across, various groups or environments, everybody does it their own way. And because of that, and because of how limited the research is for improv therapy, there's not any standardized evidence-based practices for how this can be incorporated. Everything that we've been talking about has been done, through articles we've shown, but also through a lot of anecdotal information. Here's what we've seen in our experience working with people, kids and adults who stutter. And also kind of a similar vein, for lack of unified curriculum, there's also a lot of variability within this. And so a lot of activities, a lot of different ways that you can incorporate things. And so it might be a little bit difficult to try to figure out how to mix and meld it all together. And so it's kind of where the creative aspects come in of, having either little or a lot of experience in the field, kind of using the skills and knowledge you have as a therapist and as a clinical provider to, be able to support your clients in the best way possible.
So, on the topic of there should be more research, I am applying to PhD programs to maybe do this research. So full disclosure, you may see me pop up again someday later, or soon. Still pending, still in the works. But, as a result of me, kind of having specific interest in this, as well as, the prospective educational journey, that I'm working towards here, kind of coming up with some research questions. And I think that these are extremely likely to change and evolve, should I be able to move forward with this. But, how do role-playing activities impact communicative confidence, considering both baseline measures and following a group intervention? So, we see that this is done. We see that this is done at camps. The camps, from, what I have been able to really gather from the research, that the camps as a whole have been very effective, and the programming is very effective, right? And, I think what they're doing probably in Australia is in line with this research question. Do these activities show that? Is there a specific measure that shows that these activities do contribute to that? Would be one. What elements of an improvisation focused program might be beneficial for increasing communicative confidence and self-perception? This one is written for adolescents, but this could be any, age, and, you could switch around kind of the second half of that. But, what are the elements? What are kind of the ingredients? As we know, there's, lots of different parts of improv, lots of different components of it, right? But perhaps more research could be done on, what parts of it are the most beneficial. What components of acting as a character might impact adolescent or children's perceptions of their communicative abilities or degree of comfort? So kind of, specifically working off of that idea of being a character. What does that mean, right? And that's not to say that, it's suggesting that kids like shouldn't be themselves, but rather that idea of that play, right? And being a character. How does that maybe impact communicative confidence, or other aspects of communication or stuttering too? And then the fourth one. I was like, I didn't write the same research question, right? No, this one actually is what component of acting as a character might impact their perception of speech or their fluency? So like we've been saying, we're often not targeting fluency as an aim, right? But it could be interesting to kind of see how, especially like the idea of speech tension, how that could be influenced by some of these activities, being a character, being in a position in improv where you were having to be in the moment directly, have to do it, right? I, am curious about perhaps like if there is any relationship between that and the outcomes of speaking or speech tension. So yeah, those are just a couple of research questions, and I think that what's great about this is that there is more work to be done. All right,
Now it's your turn to do it.
you knew this was coming.
We warned you.
You knew this was coming.
You were warned.
Okay, yeah, some of you knew this was coming.
Okay, cool.
Cool. All right, should I do mine first?
Yeah, do yours first, and I'll do mine after.
Okay, so let's see how we're gonna do this.
7 people, raise your hand.
Yep, 7 people.
If you want to do this, raise your hand, or I will call on people. All right.
Christine
Y'all
needs
ready? Natasha. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Come on up. Need 3 more people, I think.
All right, we can just kind of form like a
Right,
like
2 more people.
semicircle.
Yeah. All right. One more person. Come on down. There we go. Okay, cool. All
All right.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Awesome. Thank you.
All right, so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna stand here so that I can reference this.
So we're gonna do this 7 sentence story activity. So I think that this one is great. You kind of get both the speaking confidence, various aspects of stuttering that you can do, as well as kind of some narrative and language wrapped up in this one as well. So this is a storytelling structure that follows, like I kind of referenced in the beginning, sort of commonly known stories, Pixar films, things that we read. So the 7 elements that we'll make our story with are, and we'll go one at a time. So once upon a time, and every day, until one day, and because of this, and because of that, until finally, and ever since that day, the end. So giving the vocabulary context sounds kind of hard. So I'm gonna run you through a quick example of this. So once upon a time, this would be the first person, there was a goldfish named Fred. And every day, Fred went to the convenience store to buy eggs. Until one day, a very mean bear took the eggs away from him and said, "Get out of the store." And because of this, Fred decided to stage a protest with all the other goldfish. This was unacceptable. Bears are mean. Because of that, the bears counteracted the protest. The bears stood on opposing sides. Until finally, the group of bears and the group of goldfishes decided we were going to make peace and we're going to do meditation together. Ever since that day, they had a meditation group at Sunday. They went great. All right, so yeah, one at a time. You'll just give your sentence. So who wants to start?
I start at the beginning of the line.
You get the best one. Once upon a time, and just one sentence. Once upon a time, there was a goblin named Gilbert. Perfect.
And every day that Goblin Gilbert baked cookies with the squirrels and the parts. Until one day, Gilbert fell off the golf course.
Oh no.
And because of this, the squirrels were very confused and sent out a search party. And because of that, no cookies were ever made.
Until finally.
The little gnomes in the trees took over the cookie making.
And ever since that day.
And ever since that day, the gnomes and the squirrels were best friends.
Goblins before you said goblin. Oh yeah, you guys are you're doing the mind meld. Yeah, actually,
Yeah.
it's like wild. All right, you guys are
All right, y'all can see it. Y'all. Yeah, and so this can be done either with a group of kids or even like you and your client going back and forth.
Yeah.
To exchange sentences over and over again, and y'all can take one and go that way. Next one is going to be everyone's involved, and y'all can stay in your seats for this one. And so this is called conductor. I had the rules very briefly listed on there. Yeah, and so the conductor, which for all intents and purposes is going to be me at this moment. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so you guys are the beautiful orchestras who make a lot of wonderful music for all of us. And so I am going to be signaling to you guys to change and play with your voices in a variety of really cool and fun ways. But the only rule of this game is you cannot stop making noise. You can be singing, you can be talking, you can be saying nonsense, telling a story, talking about your dog. You can just be saying for the next however long.
We want to scare the convention
Yes,
center.
we want them to hear us on the opposite end of the hallway.
We want America's Got Talent next door to reference.
Wild that this is here. I just put that out.
What stuff is that?
Yes, and so whenever we did this with our campers, we had somebody saying, "I like Chick-fil-A" over and over and over again. We had somebody just like making a bunch of random noises. We had somebody barking like a dog. We had some telling a story. Just anything you want. You just have to be constantly making noise the entire time. And so there are 4 things that I'm going to tell y'all to do. You're either going to make your voice higher by making my hand go up, make your voice quieter, my hand go down, make your voice higher pitch, my hands go farther apart, and make your voice deeper and lower pitch, my hands go closer together. And so whenever on the count of go, everyone's just going to be making a bunch of noise constantly, and y'all are going to be watching me, and I'll be signaling louder voice, quieter voice, higher pitch, lower pitch. All right? All right, 3, 2, 1, begin. All right, we go higher, higher. All right, wider pitch.
It's a good day.
Lower, lower, lower. All right, and deeper pitch. All right, back to neutral.
Love being alive. Love being alive. Love being alive. Love being alive.
All right, do higher pitch. And back to neutral.
Love being alive. Being alive.
And louder.
Love being alive. Love being alive. Love being alive.
And
Love being alive.
louder, louder, louder.
Love being alive. Love being alive.
Stop. Okay, so yeah, a couple questions for y'all. Who could hear what the person next to them was saying and can focus on that? And how many of you were trying to focus on what you were saying and not mess up on what your words were? Yeah. Okay, and so how many of y'all have actually done anything like this before? Just quick show of hands. Yeah. And so this is a really fun way for kids to kind of loosen up and warm up a bit and be comfortable just doing a bunch of weird, crazy stuff with their voice. And so, it kind of takes the stress off of being the center of attention, and they can have a group of kids around them, and they can be all making noise together, and they can be doing a bunch of different things. And so we're going to do the same thing again, but we're going to change it up a little bit. And so I'm going to direct this side of the room to do one thing, and then this side of the room to do a different thing. Okay? So I'll stand in front of which side I'm controlling or directing. But yeah, so we're gonna kind of see if we can make our orchestra have different sounds together. All right. Okay, so 3, 2, 1, begin. All right, so this sound can go louder. All right, this is going to deeper voice. Okay, are going to be deeper and lower. Are going to be louder and higher. All right, how do you guys be deeper? How do you guys be higher? All right, and then switch. Are going to be higher?
Beautiful.
All right, y'all can stop. Thank you.
That was so good.
Yeah. That's basically what you guys can do. If you guys can have all of your kids in a group together, and you can have one kid be higher, one kid be lower, one be louder, one be quieter, and have them mix up and switch and do all the different kinds of fun things. And you can also do it in a way for body language too. And so if they're standing up, something that you will notice that the kids will start doing is their body is going to match what they're doing. So if they're louder, they're going to be standing up taller. If they're whispering and quieter, they're going to be kind of hunched down a little bit more. And so you can ask them questions too, like, how did that feel? How did it feel to play with your voice? How did it feel to kind of move your body? And what was your body even doing to begin with? And so, yeah, just kind of having different aspects for them to be comfortable communicating and not making it a super serious thing. But, it can be fun. It can be silly. It can be a game. And so that is all that we have for y'all. Thank you for coming to listen to the talk. And so we have time for questions. We also have the QR code if you want to scan it. It has access to a document that has a list of a few different games and activities that you can incorporate. And then alongside that also has explanations of how it incorporates into speech, language, communication, and all of those things therapeutically as well.
Yeah. I did throw my Instagram on there. I have a professional Instagram that I really haphazardly use, and I'd like to improve on that in the next few years as a long-term goal.
Mhm.
So the reason I put it on there is that I hope to post more resources as I hopefully continue to kind of explore this topic. And then I also put a website on there that does contain the PowerPoint slides. I think the slides are also available through this conference. I did upload them to a thing. I don't know what that leads to.
Or where to
Okay.
find it, but we will go explore it together. Oh, thank you so much.
Fabulous.
There we
So
go.
you can access it in both places if you really like it. Download it twice.
Yeah.
I get no commission from it. So
Yes.
I just said that.
Yes, we paid to be here. So yes, but also we do have some time for questions if y'all have anything that they want to ask, either about this topic. Yes, sir. Did the stuttering change while they're role playing?
I think that I I noticed that for some of the campers, I think that I perceived them having less effort and a little bit less tension. It definitely depended on the camper, and this wasn't, a universal thing.
Mhm.
But I would say that, for some of them, it varied a little bit. Yeah, I think. Would you agree?
I would say to some aspects that you can also see in the video that we played too that a lot of the campers still did stutter even in that too. And so I think that like what we mentioned earlier, like kind of spontaneous speech of it was less so focused on, I have to get this out and kind of just like we'll see what happens and go with the flow. I think at least partly the environment of, everybody like it's a place where people can stutter freely and that people will sit there and wait for you 10 minutes to get a line out. And like no one's rushing anybody about it. So there might be some variation, but I think overall it's pretty consistent for most of them. Yeah. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
Have you seen or do you think this would work?
Yeah. I can speak to that a little bit. I think that it definitely could. I do know that improv has actually been kind of like effectively done virtually like during the pandemic. I know it sounds a little wild, but it has been shown to be able to be done with adults well. I do know that there is a stuttering organization that is trying to do more of that. I am forgetting their name. I feel so bad. Space to Stutter. It's called Space to Stutter. I believe I had a conversation with them. They are kind of wanting to pilot that a little bit. So yeah, I think it could. I think we would probably want that research maybe in person first.
Adapted.
But yes, I do think it could be adapted. Yeah.
Anybody else? Yes.
What's been like your favorite part about being this has there been like a good success story with it?
You want to share first? Sure.
You can go ahead.
Yeah. So actually, last year was my first year doing it. I will be returning again this year. And I think for me, it was eye-opening in the sense of, as a therapist, I've never seen, an environment where it's basically a therapy camp before. And that's kind of my first experience in that environment and in that role. And so seeing how some of the older campers that have been there for 7, 8, 9, 10 years really opened up and they were super comfortable with it. And they were encouraging the other campers who are a bit younger, maybe a bit new, bit less experienced as them. And then also just seeing how, the encouragement and the comfortability and the confidence these kids had by the end of the week of like day one, for a lot of them, that was a new place and they did not know anybody there. They did not really have any friends or know what to expect. And then by day 5, like kids were crying because they were going home.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to stay and talk to everybody and sharing emails and phone numbers and all the things. And then I think personally for me as well, is like I didn't have any of this growing up as a kid who stuttered. Like I think this camp started, 14, 13 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. 15 years ago.
Thank you.
Also, some other camp leaders are here as well, too.
Yeah.
And so it's like a lot of these things that are happening now only started recently in the past 5 or 6 years. And whenever I was in therapy, it was 10, 15 years ago. And so there are a lot more resources now, thankfully, for kids who stuttered, but there wasn't whenever I was growing up. And so kind of personally, as a person who stutters, like there was a heavy emotional moment of like, oh my gosh, finally, people are getting the help that, wasn't available to me and my friends whenever we were growing up.
Yeah, and I can say having, gone over, I think 4 or 5 times years, you really see them grow up, and that's cool. I'm sure you guys, have experienced that too. And yeah, I think just the change, like we gave, the example of Camper M, that change is very powerful to witness.
Any other questions? Yes. What's next for us? I am doing my PhD right now at UT Dallas, and I'm actually focusing more on the neurological side of stuttering and kind of figuring out, why it happens and all of that. I'm also doing my CF right now. I graduated in July, so I'm like a brand new therapist.
Crazy.
Yeah, so I'm going to be in school for the rest of my life probably, and hopefully do research about the neurological aspects of stuttering and how we can help, adults, teens, and kids that stutter, and trying to figure out, why it happens and go from there.
Yeah, I was just accepted to a PhD program yesterday. Thank you. There's a lot of thinking and discernment that needs to be done still on logistics. I think my next step, though, just to speak broadly, is I do want to transition from clinical work to academia, and I would like to research this topic specifically, in a university setting. So, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Where's the location of shout out, and also, you said you did 4 days, and what was the time frame during those days? Was it an hour long?
60
It was an hour.
60, yeah, hour.
And it's in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Where it's located at. Yeah. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, thoughts? Yes. I mean, I think I think there's benefits to both. Honestly, like there is something that is unique about going to a stay away camp for a week with other campers. I think there's also things that are beneficial about being in a local community with people that you see consistently for longer than 1 week a year. And I think that both have different aspects, but I think that both can be helpful depending on the camper. If they're, comfortable kind of going away for the week and they are in a place where they want to do that versus if they kind of need a more local and more private almost environment, a local community area.
And I'll just quick add to that, like, there is a pretty good I think we have a pretty good body of research about, I referenced it at one point in the presentation, like the impact of support groups and camps. Like it's, that we do have some literature on that. And yeah, I agree with what Christine said too.
Yes.
Was the camp on the studio?
Yeah, I was. I think.
Wow.
Yeah. Good question, Jamie.
The camp got bigger, and so.
Yes.
We just needed a bigger space, so now we're in Grand Rapids, it's only like 45 minutes away, but it's just a bigger camp space.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
And they're better showers.
Yes.
That are attached to the cabins.
I cannot emphasize that enough.
Yeah. The stories I heard was apparently it was like an outdoor detached from the
Sure
from
was.
the rooms, and you got like walk in the dark to go shower. So not anymore. Thoughts, questions, comments?
Oh, I didn't know it would do
It
that.
makes noise. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
On table over there.
This one, right?
Yeah.
All right, so that's CSHA 2595. Yeah, and any like feedback, ideas, kind of even thoughts about the research questions, we would welcome.
Yeah, and we're also here afterwards too.
Yeah.
If y'all need to leave.
You had a
Yes.
in the camp as a whole or at the improv workshop? In the camp? Can you help me out with this?
Yeah, we had 55 campers.
Thank you.
Last year, and about that many adults, and we take about 20 grad students, about 29.
Yeah.
So there's about 100.
Yeah.
People total full afternoon without the week. So to clarify that not everyone at the camp does the improv workshop.
Correct.
Like,
Yeah.
No.
the choose your own adventure.
Yeah.
Yes, kids are given 4 options. They can either do the improv group, they can do something called like a newscaster role, where they can like have access to computers, devices, whatnot. They kind of update the camp on what's happening in the real world outside of the camp. And then also what else was there?
And I think that this like kind of changes on a year.
It's different.
These ones were, focused on some kind of element of performance, but generally speaking, they get to choose activities fairly frequently.
Between 3 or 4 different things that they can all split up between.
Yeah.
We're good.
Anything else? Any heckling?
Yes. Things you guys did not like about the presentation.
Go for it. Actually,
Criticism.
I gave this presentation to some of my improv friends at home and I told them to heckle me so that I could practice focusing on it. They did a really good job. By the end of it, I was a little self-conscious.
Or anything else? Yes. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. Activity sounds. I think
Mhm.
like, either or a little bit.
Good, yeah, good point. Yeah, that would be really helpful if you were, depending on the kid's language level. I would say like with the story one, there is like a visual that goes along with that one. And to be honest, even with the adult improv classes, like that's really hard to remember. And we put it on the whiteboard. I don't make them memorize it. So yeah, I think that you could take any of these activities. I think you could create a visual to adapt most of them, right?
And like for conductor, you can even have like the hand signs of like a volume versus like the louder versus quieter and like an arrow up or down or kind of whatever, or what level they're at and kind of adjust it for them. And yeah, instead of like having the hand models, you can also like point to the picture they're having or kind of like have different ways for them to see that as well. So yeah, honestly, a lot of these can be adjusted for visual references. I don't think we have any on hand.
I know the 7 sentence story one has a few online if you look it up. You just Google it, like in improv, even just in general, there is. But that's a really great point.
I just had a thought on, search directions. It could be interesting to see the difference in impact, in improv versus.
Oh, yeah.
Production, not the production first, but like a.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just how that impacts the perception, individual perception of stuttering and their own.
Thank you so much.
Add that to your list.
Thank you, Natalie. Thank you. That's new to me, it's all a little new.
New to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all are dismissed.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for playing with us.